Hello, brothers and sisters. I'm Brother Joseph. I'm Elder Joseph. So this lesson out of the Book of Mormon is going to involve, is teaching husbands how to treat their wives. So this lesson in the Book of Mormon sets an example of the way that a husband should treat his wife according to God's way. So God has given us the Book of Mormon, these holy scriptures, to help husbands to be better husbands. And it's very important. This is extremely important. So in the Book of Mormon, on page 10, chapter 5, there's a family. There's husband and wife. Lehi is the husband. Sariah is the wife. And the mother of the children. Lehi is the father. So, Lehi and Sariah had some older boys. They sent them off to go take care of some business, to go get some records that they had left behind in Jerusalem. So they go to get those records. It started out with Lehi being warned of God to tell his sons to go get those records because they contain very important family history. So Sariah was, already stressed out. She's a mother, she's a woman, she's going to be emotional. Her sons are being sent to a very dangerous part of the world. This family is not well liked in Jerusalem because Father Lehi is a prophet. So they're persecuted. Death threats have been made against the family. And now Lehi is sending the boys to go back to Jerusalem, which is a very dangerous place for them to go. So Sariah is very nervous about it. She's having panic attacks. So while the boys are off getting the family history, they have several arguments. So in one of the arguments, Sariah, she loses it. She has a nervous breakdown. She accuses Father Lehi of being a visionary man, basically just saying that he's delusional and hallucinating, saying that you sent our boys off to a dangerous place, and they're dead, and so how does Lehi handle his wife yelling at him, insulting him? Does he yell back? No, he doesn't. Does he get physically abusive? No, he doesn't. He remains calm. In fact, he goes on to say in verse 4 on chapter 5 on page 10 in the Book of Mormon, he says, "Okay, you're right. I know that I am a visionary man. If I had not seen the things of God in a vision, I should not have known the goodness of God, but had stayed in Jerusalem and perished with everyone else." So he's not arguing with his wife. He said he's agreeing with her. You're right. I've seen something. You're right. So when he says that, by saying that, he's not being the boss. He's not being authoritative. I'm the man of the house. You do what I say. I'm the man. You don't question me. I'm the man. Did Lehi say that? No, he did not. Instead, he said, okay, you're right. I've seen things that, I've seen things. I've seen visions. Then he goes on to say, I've obtained a land of promise, in the which things I do rejoice. Yeah, and I know that the Lord will deliver my sons out of the hands of Laban and bring them down again unto us in the wilderness. So he tells his wife, he comforts her in a loving voice. He says, our sons will come back. Trust in God. God will bring them back. I promise you, our sons will come back. They will come back with our family history. I promise you, our sons will come back. Everything will be okay. Eventually, he calms his wife down, and, she's crying. I can imagine that at that point, he's hugging her. She's crying in his chest. You know, and so in verse 6 it says, after this manner of language did my father Lehi comfort my mother Sariah concerning us. And so, as it turns out, the boys did return. When the boys returned, it says, and my mother was comforted. So it's very important, husbands, that when you tell your wife something big, whether it's starting a new job, moving away from a place that she's comfortable with, some kind of relocation, if it's buying a house, if it's sending a son or a daughter off somewhere, or letting a son or a daughter do something that she may not fully agree with or may not understand, as a husband, you have to understand that it is very important that you be right. Because that's all that Sariah was wanting from Lehi, was to know that she just wanted to know, I need reassurance. I need to know that you really are right, and you really did get this message from God, and that you haven't just lost your mind. I need reassurance. When your wife's having a nervous breakdown, it's important, that you remember these things. You have to be right. You need to make sure that this idea that you're getting, this thing that you're getting, is from God and it's not you. Because if you're wrong, it's going to hurt your marriage. See, in this case, Lehi was right. The instructions that he got to leave Jerusalem and then send his sons back to a dangerous part of the world, to Jerusalem, it was right. And it was proven to be right, because the boys returned with the family history, and Sariah was reassured. She was comforted, and when you look at verse 8, she says, now I know of a surety that the Lord has commanded my husband to flee into the wilderness. And I also know of a surety that the Lord hath protected my sons, and delivered them out of the hands of Laban, and given them power whereby they could accomplish the thing which the Lord hath commanded them. So Sariah was happy. She was rejoiced. See, Sariah was having a hard time even comprehending to leave Jerusalem in the first place. Having to relocate from a place where you raised your children, that's a hard thing to do. And that is what the problem was. Sariah hadn't even gotten over having to leave all the land that they worked for, the place where they grew up, where their parents grew up, and then having to deal with not just relocation, but sending their sons off. That got to be a little bit too much for her. And so at that point, Lehi had to be right. And I'm telling you, it's very important that you don't yell at your wife, that you're not abusive, you don't call her names, because if you do, it will be real difficult for your wife to ever feel the same about you. A woman's emotions are pretty fragile. Men tend to be way more forgiving than women. I've seen this quite often. Men will be upset for a while, but will get over it. Women, they're pretty sensitive about certain things. So, men, you have to be right. Don't be abusive. Don't be physically abusive. Lehi didn't argue with his wife. This part of the Book of Mormon sets a perfect example about how husbands should treat their wives. And you could turn this around and have it go the other way. You could say that this sets an example of how wives should treat their husbands. Don't be abusive to your husband. Don't yell at him. Don't call him names. Be patient with him. Compromise with him. If he's saying hurtful things to you, then say, okay, that offends me. I don't like that. I don't like being called those names. I don't like you raising your voice at me. If there's physical assault, I set the boundaries. I won't have that. That's not of God. So it's very important, to not be abusive in a marriage. Don't be verbally abusive. Don't be emotionally abusive. Because your spouse has a different idea or a different opinion about something than you do. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson out of the Book of Mormon. I hope this helps to strengthen your marriage. And that's it from Brother Joseph.